Congratulations, the bombers hit the target and you and your wingmen survived to return to base. As you exit the target area, you'll continue to escort the bombers until you get to friendly territory. Once near your destination, you'll start to descend to landing. In this episode, we'll look at some of the considerations for the descent phase of the flight. I'm going to list some of the things that work for me and my guys, but if you have some stuff to add, please put it in a comment and provide links to references if you have any. Your contributions and tips help others along the way. Please share this video. Hey, okay guys, thanks for coming back to the Air Warfare group and watching that great intro as I am working hard to try to get my video editing skills better since I switched over to OBS for capturing and DaVinci Resolve for editing. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you like the video's improvement over the last 2 or 3 months, give me a thumbs up. It's pretty amazing the journey I'm on right now. Feels good. And what I'm going to talk about is some of the stuff that I have found works for me in DCS that I marry from real world flying and flight training and what you can find online. But I also am putting it into a semi-realistic consideration for what a World War II pilot would do coming back from a mission, coming home from an escort mission or something like that. So, you know, at one point you're going to separate from the bombers during your mission, and it's usually going to be after you've escorted them in and out of the target area, and then you're back into friendly controlled area, or you've got some relief fighters coming up to help. But at one point you're going to separate because rarely do you see bombers and fighters take off from the same air base, and you're going to want to go back to where your ground crews are, where your crew chief is. He's waiting for his girl to come home, and you're going to want to go back there. And you'll basically get away from the bombers, and you'll start heading to your home base. You'll have your package in tow with you. And here's some of the considerations that I think fit for me, and it might work for you. But if these aren't complete, please plug in your recommendations and ideas too, because that's what makes the community better, is everybody sharing in a positive way the information they've learned over the years. If you've got references, throw those in there too. That's awesome. So here's what I go through when I'm coming back from a mission. First thing I look at is how far away am I from my home destination. I don't want to drop down too much because you want to stay as high as possible for many considerations like fuel quantity. If you don't have enough gas to get back, you might want to stay as high as possible to maximize your fuel range and everything. The other thing that you're going to have to balance is how much oxygen do you have left? How much O2 is still in that tank? And you can see that on your oxygen gauge in the cockpit. And lo and behold, DCS World is modeled so well that you actually consume oxygen during the flight if you have it on. The weather is always a factor, and it's usually not the weather at altitude, it's the weather below you. You don't want to descend into icing conditions or a thick cloud bank, a thick cloud layer that's 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 feet thick. You don't want to descend into that and cruise into that and not be able to see everybody. So you'll want to stay above that in most cases. The terrain below you is another consideration, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute in a different slide, but you don't want to descend and cruise at an altitude that's going to put you in conflict with any terrain. And going back on the distance and what I said about you want to maintain as much altitude as possible for fuel economy, but it gives you that glide buffer if you do have an engine problem or if you've taken some damage and your engine quits on you and stuff like that. So the threats, of course, you don't want to fly down low if any ships or any ground artillery are going to shoot at you. And then any traffic. If you've got other formations, other packages, remember in the real world, it's just not me and 4 buddies or 3 buddies out there saving the world. It's a whole group of fighters and bombers and support aircraft that you're going to have to compete for airspace and everything. So you'll have your briefing assigned altitude, and you'll try to use that as much as possible based on some of the contingencies that I've mentioned before. There's a lot of consideration when it comes to the wind, as far as if you've got a really stout headwind at a certain altitude, you may want to change altitudes just to get out of that wind to save some of your gas and everything. Activity at the destination airfield is going to be a big one, and as well as any airfields that are along the way. You don't want to fly at a certain altitude and get into somebody else's traffic pattern at an airfield that's close to yours. So you'll have a procedural approach where you'll come in from a certain angle at a certain altitude to enter your overhead gate or your traffic pattern altitude, and then do your brake, come in, and everything. A variable that I don't really consider that much unless I have it is damage. Sometimes you'll have enough damage where if your O2 system's not working, if your heat system's not working, your pitot heat and your gun port heat, you don't really need that if you're close to home base anymore. But if your pitot heat's not working and because it's got damage to it, you may have to descend down to a warmer altitude to keep from icing up. And then, of course, the biggest probably important thing you have to consider is the wife calling for dinner, or does she want to watch something on Netflix? And I get hit with this variable a lot of times. You guys may know that. Another thing that I want to really plug as its own separate item is any contingency airfields or emergency divert airfields that you're going to want to go to if you have an emergency, or if you didn't calculate your fuel properly, or if one of your wingmen has an emergency and you have to take them to safely to another airfield. In our group, we have a rule as a 4-ship. If -3 has to divert or -4 has to divert, -3 and 4 go together. That nobody goes home alone. Nobody goes to the opposite base alone. If there's 3 of us and one of us has to divert, we all divert to the same airfield. That's how we do it. We never divert alone, and it seems to work for us. Another consideration to ask about for height, or what your descent procedure would be, is what are we flying over? Are we over large open ocean? Because if we are, I'm going to want to keep as much altitude as practical, not as possible, but as practical, to marry my descent location, my weather, my fuel state, everything. It's kind of a balance. And what I say is have preset altitudes that you're going to use as gates of what you want to do. And you can look at this on the map. You can do it in your pre-mission planning. You can even do it while you're flying. You can see the coast of England, and you say, hey, I'm going to come back and I want to cross the coast at 10,000 MSL or AGL. It's pretty much at sea level. It's pretty much the same. But basically, the lower you are, the more gas you're going to use. So you have to be mindful of that. All right, let's jump into the cockpit and see how it looks putting all this together in the air. Okay, everybody, we are in the cockpit now. We just made it across the English Channel. We're heading back to our base. Now, the bombers are landing at Manston, and we are going to go to Eastchurch. That's where our fighter base is. So we're going to take this opportunity, now that we're over the English coast and over land, to descend below the clouds. We've got this big open hole here right by Manston. As a matter of fact, when we fly over, we'll probably be able to look down and see it if we wanted. But that is the lead up to the estuary right there. It goes up towards that way to the estuary that leads into the Thames. And we're going to fly this heading right here until we get to Eastchurch. Eastchurch is going to be our recovery airfield. That's where our fighter support group is, with all our maintainers and our rest of our squadron. So, rest of our group, fighter group. So we are going to just descend. We're pulling the power back a little bit, keeping enough on. We're watching our temperatures. We got a little cool there on the descent, so we can close up the supercharger, or close up the doors on the oil cooler and the radiator cooler. And let's go ahead and let that warm up a little bit. As we're descending, we're just getting down. We're driving and diving here. Now, we stayed up for most of those considerations all the way across the channel, all the way from the bomb site. 1, to escort the bombers, and 2, basically to take care of all those things I mentioned in the slideshow. So we're ready to descend down to Eastchurch, and we are going to go land in the next episode. So that's about it. Really, there's nothing on this phase I need to tell you any further, other than just manage your engine, manage your fuel, all the way down to when you're touching down, wheels on the ground. Remember, it's not over until you're home safe. Hope you guys like the video series. One more to go, and that's the arrival and landing. That should be a good one. We'll talk to you guys later. This is Juice, out.